Welcome to Time to Teach with Tammy, the podcast that gives tips, advice, and suggestions to teachers by a real teacher. So sit back and enjoy. And oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe. And we're back. Welcome to episode 91 of Time to Teach. Today's episode is entitled Taking on Science Workshop. So this year is actually the very first year that I have been doing science workshop. I mean, we've been doing science and social studies, but not the way that I'm doing it this year. This year I'm trying to incorporate more science. I'm being a lot more intentional. And so in today's episode, I'm just going to kind of talk about that experience, what it is, how I do that, and just kind of share some ideas I have. Okay, so I'd like to begin by saying this was kind of originated because last year, probably closer to the end of the school year, we got some feedback. My school section, I teach in the elementary section, got some feedback from the science department. One science teacher who I believe was speaking on behalf of their science department for middle school. And basically the feedback was that, hey, the kids coming to us are really, really good at life science, but that seems to be it in terms of science. And they were just noticing that there were some deficits, some areas that they felt we could improve on. And of course, we listened to that feedback and kind of looked at the things that we were teaching them, looked at next generation science standards, and saw that, yeah, we are doing a lot of things, maybe not in the way that it's meant in next generation science standards, but we're teaching a lot of those topics, but there are also areas that we are not teaching. So this year we kind of agreed that we were gonna, take on something from next generation science that we're not teaching and incorporate that, maybe add an additional unit, infuse it within a unit, something like that. And so we did. Last year we looked at our units and we did find a space within, I believe, Unit 3, which actually we ended up redesigning. That's probably a great topic for another episode. But we found a 2-week time slot that we said, hey, we can work on a unit for forces, push and pull. So we kind of set it up. We haven't even really hashed it out because we're not there yet. In fact, one of our upcoming meetings will be to be working on that. But in any case, that was kind of the genesis of where or why I'm taking on science workshop. So this year I thought, well, I'm not only going to teach that one unit. I really want to get to know next generation science standards a little bit better. I want to know what this is. We have been teaching science and social studies in our kind of theme units. So every unit that we have is built around a unit. The very beginning of the school year, our first unit is a myself unit, my place and my place in the world, and it's all about kind of understanding community, our special roles within community, probably very similar to many younger elementary units at the beginning of the school year. I mean, just very, very appropriate units to be starting the school year with. So what we typically do is we look for read alouds and shared reading that will kind of tie into what that theme is. By the way, we use a backwards design approach, specifically Understanding by Design, Wiggins and McTighe. I'm sure those names are not new to you. In case they are, I really encourage looking up those names, because I feel like the backwards design is such an incredible way to design units. I mean, you really kind of instill the idea that everything you're doing should be done to be reaching those larger goals. So yeah, if those are new names, definitely look it up. So that's basically how we approach science and social studies. Our time is very limited. I personally have my TA when she's working in small groups, she's working on the social studies and science themes. I don't know that that's true for every classroom, but I can say for my classroom it is. Not that that's even necessarily an expectation. It's really hard to fit in those things. Just personally, that's how I make it work in my classroom. So this year what I did is I said, okay, I want to include more than just our 2-week push and pull unit. I feel like that's insufficient. But I love this, the school I feel is so good about taking things bite size, and when we're trying to do something, they don't say, okay, you got to do it all at once. They allow us to kind of dabble, experiment, get our feet wet. So I believe that's why, we're taking on a small unit, but there's definitely more that we can do. And so it basically leaves room for teachers who, if they want to experiment more, then they can, but there's not the pressure of how do I fit this into everything that I'm doing in a day, in a week, in a month, in a school year. So I really appreciate that. So I kind of looked at my schedule and decided that Monday will be my day to do science workshop. And this is primarily because Monday is one of those days that is already kind of an off day in my weekly schedule. It's an off day because we have flag assembly, so there's already at least a good half hour that's kind of going into our academic time. Although I actually really appreciate flag assembly. I think it's a really great way to establish community, and it's something that we're all doing in the elementary section. So yes, it takes away time for other things, but it builds on things that I feel are really important. So it's a give and take. But because we already are doing that, then I just feel like that's a perfect day. So what I've been doing is on Mondays, we have flag assembly. We come in, I have my kids, I show them who their recess buddies are for the day. And recess buddies are, I've done probably a whole episode at this point and have referred to recess buddies in the past, but it's something I do where I pair students up and assign who they will play with. So we're doing that, and then we have our class meeting. I've combined everything on a Monday because it's already a day that my schedule's different, so why not just combine everything? So I decided I'll do science workshop on a Monday because of all of these factors. It just fits really, really well. And so I have been finding that Monday is definitely working out as a great day to do that, and I actually really forward to it. I've been loving science workshop. So now that I've kind of explained the genesis of science workshop, now I kind of want to get into a little bit more of what exactly is it in terms of the format, the layout, the actual logistics of doing it. So I explained the morning flag assembly, we go there, we come back, we talk about recess buddies, so we do a class meeting. Then my kids have their first recess. Then they have an hour of Spanish, and then I come back to the classroom and we do a half an hour of word work. I do still like to introduce our new words, our new sight words for the week. So I like to do that. And then, let's see, that goes from 11 to 11:30. And then basically 11:30 to 1:10 is my science workshop. So the way I do it is I open up, I take about 10-15 minutes to do a read aloud, and the read aloud will connect with whatever topic. Right now we're in a weather and climate unit. So we've been learning about the sun and its effect on Earth. We've been learning about wind. Currently we're learning about seasons. We have kind of a 2-week study of seasons and its effect on weather, kind of looking at the patterns and, how you can predict those patterns based on where the cycle is with the seasons. And so my read aloud will pertain to that topic. And it's really meant to kind of pique the students' interest. Now, if you're following Next Generation Science Standards, you might know that it's a lot about kind of collecting data and then evaluating and analyzing the data and then coming to conclusions about a phenomena based on the data. So if you're following Next Generation Science Standards, you're not necessarily explaining, oh, this happens because XYZ. You're kind of letting them experiment and evaluate and then make those decisions. So you want them to still come to those decisions, but you want it to be based more on the work that they've done, not that you as a teacher are delivering that knowledge to them. So I try to choose read alouds that are kind of getting them interested. Sometimes my read alouds do explain things, but that's also because I'm new at this and I'm also not necessarily following Next Generation Science Standards to a T in terms of what they're trying to accomplish with their storylines and everything else, although that is a goal because I think it's a pretty interesting way and I believe effective way to be teaching, because it's letting students really have to I don't want to say discover, although it kind of is, but there's a lot of guidance involved and you're helping them discover. So it's taking away from, I'm just delivering all this knowledge and now it's like, no, they're actually having to figure it out. So I love that. So anyway, open up with a read aloud. Then I will have 4 stations. And so we will go into the first station, and in a second I'll explain those stations. They go into like 15 minutes of the first station. Well, I call it rotation. And then we come back to the carpet, and then I will follow up and do another maybe mini video, or if I couldn't read the whole read aloud, I will continue reading that. But typically it's a video or something to kind of add on to the learning, especially since we're only doing this once a week. I really try to maximize that time. So we're back at the carpet. I'm doing another little basically mini lesson, if you will. Then we go into our next rotation. Then we're back at the carpet. Sometimes I'll throw in another video or another lesson based on time, and then back to our third rotation, back to the carpet. And usually for the last rotation, it's just come to the carpet and then we go off into our last rotation. You might think, oh, that seems like wasted time. Nope, I'm working with young students and their stamina is only so strong for so long. So it's a nice break, I find, a nice mind and movement break, just the act of cleaning up their stations, coming to the carpet square. So even if I'm not teaching something new, it's just breaking up. It's a couple minutes. My time in between is very quick. I feel personally that I'm pretty good at transitions and not wasting time. But my students do need that time. So obviously I'd love every academic minute be used for learning, but I think we know that in terms of stamina and what students can be doing cognitively, that also is not healthy. So it's nice to have a couple minutes break where they're cleaning up, coming to the carpet, and then we break off and go into our last station. So that's a little story on why we do that. Okay, so in terms of what are the stations? So because science workshop, aside from our word work time, is really the only thing that we're doing. I mean, it's not the only thing we're doing, but kind of is. I make sure that I have one station that's a reading station, and I include science books in there. So they have that going on. That's one station. A reading station, that's always the same. Then I have a seesaw station. Seesaw station is always a seesaw station for science, and I will have something related to our topic. So this week it is seasons. I can't remember What in the world? Oh, I know. This week they choose their favorite season and they have to illustrate it and explain why that's their favorite season. And obviously in the illustration, I'm looking that they're showing me that they know something about that season. So not just, oh, summer's my favorite. I want to see, do they understand what would the weather maybe perhaps look like during that season? What would be clothes that would be worn during that season? And of course, also, this is very much based on geographical location, keeping all of that in mind. But foods that might be typical, patterns of animal behavior, things like that, I'm looking for in the illustration and in their reflection. Then there are 2 teacher stations. One is with my TA. So she will teach something, again, based on whatever topic. So going back last week, she was reading a book on wind, and she would read a couple pages, stop, they would discuss it, and my students would kind of do some sketch noting, sketch what they learned, label it. I really like using that as ways that students can really hold on to their learning. So I've been, for the last several years, using some more sketch noting. I just really love that as an effective learning strategy. So that was last week. This week, because we've been working on seasons and we're doing this whole weather and climate, in the station with the TA, they are going to be building a shelter to keep people safe from the weather. And this is also because we're in math, we are also doing a measurement unit. So we're learning about length and height with unconventional means of measuring. So using Unifix cubes. And I would have to look back at what I said in the assignment, but I believe it's build a shelter that is 7 cubes long and so many cubes high. It might have been 7 and 7, I don't remember. And it must have a space for a window and a door. So, and they're going to work in partnership. So part of that is to connect to, so they can have the discussion, like, why do we need shelter from weather? And then the other part is to incorporate the math that we're doing, the mathematical concepts in terms of measurement. And then also they'll be doing it in partnerships. So they're not really, it's going to be somewhat ambiguous because I want them to collaborate with their partners and talk about how they're going to do it. So there's a social aspect to it. Really am trying to combine like everything that I can. But yeah, so that's the station with her. And then for me, I am teaching the new math lesson of the day. So because we're not doing reading and writing workshop, and we're not doing math workshop, we're just doing science workshop. My station is a teaching station. We are in a measuring unit. So that's why I am working on that. So I'll be continuing that. Continuing the measuring that we're doing. So yeah, so that's basically it, you guys. Those are the stations that I do. I've been doing that. Well, and every week, obviously, the stations change based on our topic and where we are in our unit, and continuing that. But that's basically the layout, and I do that every Monday. And I have to say, I so look forward to Mondays. I would say Monday's probably my favorite day of the week in terms of what we're doing in our classroom. I love it. And my kids, you guys, they love it so much. Like, it's just, what kid doesn't want to learn? I mean, I feel like it speaks to kids' natural curiosity about life and the world and how and why things work and function. And that's what science is. It's all about really kind of discovering how the world works and trying to figure out why does this happen, and that's what kids are always doing. They're always asking questions. They're always trying to explore. And I'm just finding so much success with this. I love it. I would say I don't have assessments to go with what we're doing. So that's definitely an area of growth for me. And, but I'm just kind of, my goal this year is just really dabbling with all of this. And yeah, I totally, totally love it. And I do want to kind of add on, this might be unrelated, but it actually is related. If you have been well, I'm an avid podcast listener, so I don't know. I feel like this is out in the world and everywhere, so you probably have heard it, but I don't know. I'm thinking maybe if I wasn't such an avid podcast listener, maybe I would not have heard this, but there's so much information coming out right now. There's a lot of tension about reading and the science of reading, and there's been a lot of criticism coming down on the way that teaching is taught in many schools. And one of the things coming out of this that don't think I was aware of, so a lot of people are talking about how many elementary schools don't teach content. And I found this very surprising, because if you're not teaching content, what are you teaching? And it turns out that many elementary schools just basically teach reading strategies and comprehension, but not actual content. So they might use a book to teach something, but there's not a comprehensive, cohesive unit or theme. And this, now that this is coming out, it's being surmised that it could be part of the issue. Certainly not the only one. And the way reading is being taught is a huge issue. But the fact that there's no content basically is going to hold students back, when you think in terms of like a lot of reading is going to be based on your background knowledge. And you're not going to be super successful in a book if you have no background knowledge of the concepts or whatever from that book. And because this is coming out now, people are wondering like, whoa, this could be a big part of why we're having issues with reading. Students struggling with reading because there's no cohesive content being taught in schools. And again, like I said, I find that very alarming, but it makes me feel very good about what my school does, because everything that we're doing is based on these bigger units and themes. Like right now we are in a census unit. So we're talking about our senses on the daily, every single day. So we're through read alouds, through our shared reading, through small group work, that they're building every day. They're building more vocabulary. They're building onto the day prior of it. And I'm just thinking, gee, if we were only focusing on the reading strategy and the phonics instruction and there was nothing else built around it, that's very incomplete. I know that many teachers get stuck on, well, reading is the most important thing, and yes, it is. But if you're not reading to learn more about something, or if you're not writing for a bigger purpose, like writing to send a message out to change the world, then it suddenly loses its impact and it loses its value, I think. I mean, yes, we need to know how to read, but why do we need to know how to read? I mean, I need to know how to read because I want information I want to be able to read about what's happening in the world. I want to inform myself. I want to be a better educated person. So that's why I need to know how to read. And really, that's why my students need to know how to read. We're not just learning how to read just for the sake of reading. There has to be a bigger purpose behind that. And I think somewhere down the line, that has been lost. And that's alarming. So I'm throwing this out here because I don't know who's listening and I don't know what your reality is. And this is not to criticize anyone. I think we all do what we feel is best. And if this is what's happening, that content is not being taught, I'm sure that this was not a decision that an individual teacher made. I think as schools, we really have to examine what we're doing, and are our practices really conducive to learning, and are they getting to those greater objectives? So that's it. Like I said, kind of unrelated to science workshop, but also very related. All of that is to say we need to find time to make sure we are teaching content, because those, like we cannot just get rid of social studies and science because we need to focus on reading. We can focus on reading through the lens of science and social studies. And we need to do those things. And not just science and social studies, but all things. Character building, being good citizens. All of those things are very important, and we can be reaching academics through that. And I feel like something has severely been missed. I mean, Wiggins and McTighe with their understanding by design, and that was the whole premise, that units and teaching and learning happens when you're examining big ideas that really mean something. And I feel like that was a loud message. I don't know that everyone has gotten that message, but I believe that was very clear. So I think we've known this for many years, but maybe something changed, and our focus probably changed. All right, that's it, you guys. That got a little bit longer than I wanted, but now it is time for our wins and fails for the week. I'd have to say, win for the week is I definitely we're at the end of trimester 1, so I'm done with report cards. I do want to do a last double look, but I finished that, and I feel really good about having that off my plate, so that's a big win. And I would say a fail for the week would be related to my podcast. I'm really, at this point, just barely keeping up. I've always been really good about batching my episodes, but lately I have not been batching. I just have a lot going on with many things. So my time, energy, and focus right now is on other things. So I'm kind of very last minute, and I'm not a last minute person, but I am someone who puts my time, energy, and focus on my priorities. And yes, time to teach is my priority, but batching episodes right now is not. So I'm just kind of barely getting things done, but in terms of my podcast, so it's kind of a fail, but it's also what it needs to be right now for a while I have other things that I'm working on, and I'm sure I will be giving you more information about that at a later time. But anyway, that's it, you guys. I would love to hear from you, especially if you're incorporating science and maybe next generation science standards or otherwise. I'd love to hear from you. The best way to reach me is on Twitter. I can be reached at TammyJ123. That's at TAMIJ123. Until next time.
Wait a minute. Wait 1 minute. Before you go, don't forget you can catch our show notes online at www.timetoteach.libsyn. That's libsyn.com. We're also on Facebook at Time to Teach. Don't forget to check out our Facebook group, Teachers for Effective Curriculum. And if you're an educator with your own podcast show, I invite you to join our brand new Facebook group, Teachers Who Podcast. Let's grow a community where we can network, problem solve, and discuss anything and everything podcast related. I'll see you there.